What was the worst injury that I ever had fighting?
He clipped him behind the head. That's it.
Now, there's been a bunch of them. My road was quite rocky, very up and down, but I learned a lot of great lessons through it. One of the worst ones was my shoulder injury. This happened in the UFC 2015. I was fighting Naoyuki Kotani over in Japan, and I tore my labrum and my rotator in my right shoulder. Now, weird thing is I didn't actually feel it at all. I finished the fight without knowing that anything happened. I've actually watched the tape and tried to discover where it happened and can't see anything. I threw a lot of right hands. Like, my right hand was on point. I was fighting a southpaw and I landed a lot of right hands. I threw a lot of right hands, but I never felt any pain. And then I went out after the fight, ate a whole bunch of food, and woke up the next day and felt like my arm was like weird, like I had slept on my shoulder weird or something. You know how you do that, right? So it just kind of never went away. I didn't think it was actually injured, but it just never went away, and it just felt weird when I would turn it. And then eventually, like a couple months later, I'm like, okay, something's wrong. So I went and got an MRI done, and they're like, yeah, your labrum is completely torn off. Like, it's not hanging on by a thread at all. There's nothing there. And your rotator's done. So I'm like, okay, awesome, surgery. All right, so that was bad. It was a horrible rehab process, like a year of rehab, like super annoying. But it wasn't the worst one. I fractured my jaw. A lot of people saw that. That sucked. I broke it in 3 places, right? He hit me over here. I was like, he was throwing a jab and I pull countered his jab and I was like, oh, that landed. Okay, I'm gonna get him again. He threw another jab, but he didn't actually throw it. Okay, Chad Laprise, this guy is a smart dude. Okay, he feinted the jab. He feinted me, right? And I bit it. I went and I pull countered. Okay, so this is why you don't repeat the pattern. If you do something and it works, don't try to do it again right away after, okay? You gotta wait a little bit, distract him with something, then loop back to it. I did it again like an idiot. And also, as I was coming back in, this hand wasn't up, okay? So when you pull, you usually reach out with one to balance, right? Nobody pulls like that, okay? So I do this, but it's supposed to come back up on the way in, and it didn't. Bang, okay? So he hit me with an overhand, boom, as I was coming back into it, punching. I ended up face down on my face, didn't remember any of that. And then the guy came in from the side and hit the double tap, which is smart, because if I was him, I would do the same thing. But that means I took 1 shot and then a couple after while I was unconscious. I didn't feel any of that. It was weird. It was like getting knocked out is super, super, super weird, because you're fighting, everything is fine, and then all of a sudden, you're on the ground. Bang, like time traveled, right? Like it really felt like time travel, like a good, well, it wasn't great, like it wasn't my favorite fight, but I was still winning, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm all right, we're doing this. And then all of a sudden I'm on the ground. I'm like, man, I just got knocked out. And then I could feel it. I'm like, oh, my jaw's broken. Super choked. That sucked, because that was like my way into the UFC. So I'm like, oh, I'm never gonna get into the UFC. I'm gonna have to go back to the minors, and like, oh, my life is over, right? And then also, this was like right before Christmas. So I get the surgery. They wired my jaw somewhat shut. I made sure they didn't wire it shut. I just had like these like bolts. They like put like whatever, something to attach it to, and they put bolts in here, and then they like screw them in, and then they attach like these real heavy elastics like that, right? So you got these bolts in your gums and then these elastics to connect them. So I couldn't open my mouth wide, but I could get it open a little bit just so I could fit a straw in there or whatever, right? And this is right before Christmas. So that's super whack. I went back home for Christmas, and then I could eat like nothing. It was horrible. I got really sick of like drinking shakes and like eating ice cream. It seems that like most of the foods that you can eat that you don't have to chew are somewhat sweet. So I have a huge sweet tooth. Initially I was like, yeah, but then I was like, oh, this sucks. Like, I don't want to eat sweet food anymore. I want something savory. So everybody was eating spaghetti, and I was like, man, I just want to eat it. So I blended it and I tried to drink it with meat sauce, and it was so bad. It was so bad. Like the flavor doesn't change, but that texture, like You just don't do that. If you ever break your jaw, don't blend up food that you think would be good and just drink it. It's so bad. That sucked. But that wasn't the worst one. The first real bad injury that I got was in 2005, like way back. I'm fighting on this show in Lethbridge, fighting this dude. He ended up making it to the UFC later, Jesse Water Bongsfeld. That's hilarious. Just that name is hilarious, right? Water Bongsfeld. Everybody thinks it's because of water bong, right? And that was just like this big joke. But the dude actually practices Jeet Kune Do. So he's thinking like water, like be water, like Bruce Lee, but his name's also Bongsfeld. So super sick. Jesse, you're an OG, and I love that you chose that nickname. Regardless, we scrap at like 170 or something. Back in the very beginning, I really hated fighting grapplers because I didn't know really how to grapple, and I didn't know how to stop takedowns. It was a huge problem. People would hold me down, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get to actually fight, and it would piss me off a lot. This dude wouldn't do that for sure. He was just wanting to scrap like I wanted to scrap. So at least I thought I wanted to scrap. So we start scrapping and it's a good little scrap, but he hits me with a body kick. He hit me with a body kick, liver kick, and I was like, you know what, you're gonna get taken down now. So he hits me with this body kick and I go to shoot, but he hit me with the body kick and saw it hurt me, right? So then he went to go and kick the body again. So when I shot, I ended up shooting directly into the knee, right? Like he's throwing a left kick from southpaw and I'm shooting and blah, right here, right? My orbital direct to his knee, first point of contact. So I eat this horrible shot and then I finish the takedown and I'm on top of him and I'm just like thinking like, I never felt anything like that before. Like that must be what it's like to get actually hurt in a fight. That kind of sucks. It felt like somebody like lit my face on fire, like poured gasoline on my cheek and then just lit it on fire. It didn't feel like I would thought a break would feel. And then we keep fighting. They're trying to fix me up in the corner or whatever, like kinda. We didn't really have much knowledge of any of that type of stuff, like how to be a cut man or stop cuts or whatever. So I'm kind of leaking in the corner. They let the fight keep going. I go back into the second round. There's like 3 people in front of me, right? So I didn't want to strike anymore because I thought I saw 3 dudes. I'm like, nope, we're not striking. We're grappling. So I just grab this dude. I grab him, I get double underhooks. But then I realized that I have no idea how to do a takedown because Bill Mahood was my coach and what he would say is like, this is our takedown. I'm like, okay, well, I got a body lock now. So what do I do with it? And I didn't really have a good answer. So what I did was highly unintelligent. That's not a good use of grammar, but whatever. Grammar police, feel free to roast me for that. I get double underhooks. I pull this guy on top of me and try to sweep him with butterfly guard. With double underhooks, right? Obviously, homie's just gonna post his hand on the ground and not turn over. So that's what happened. And then I laid under him in my guard, trying not to get my face continually broken for the rest of that 5-minute round until right at the very end of that 5-minute round, he hit me with an overhand right and broke my nose in 2 places. And that really sucked. It made me want to grab my face immediately. And then in between the rounds, because he's a G like that, he like helps me off the ground and I'm like limp back to the corner. My whole face is just like essentially caved in. And they stopped me on the stool. I think that was the one time that Bill threw the towel in. Because he used to say like, we stand on the towel in this gym. Like we'll never throw it in for you, which is a little bit crazy. But that's old school MMA, man. So I'm back in the corner and I'm like, it feels like my teeth are pointing backwards. Like all of these teeth here, it felt like they were like at a backwards angle going towards the back of my throat. They weren't pointing anywhere. Like they were fine. Like I was certain that my teeth were not correct, but they were fine. Super weird. But when your like nerves are so wild, right? I severed this nerve in my face, right? Or not severed it, sorry, I didn't sever it. I pinched it, right? Then I broke it, pinched this nerve that was in my face, and all of this tissue was like kind of dead, like I couldn't feel it. Even to this day, it feels a little different than this side. Because of that same trap, it was like affecting the connection with my teeth, so I felt like my teeth were off, but they weren't off. Anyway, I got that plated up, right? So I got a plate here, and I got a plate here, and I got a plate sitting under that eye. That sucked, and that's what really made me realize, like, okay, fighting is real. Like, you don't do this for fun. This is not a hobby. You're either trying to be the best in the world or get out of the game, because you're gonna get really, really, really hurt, and it's really not worth it unless you're really trying to do everything in the sport. That's where that part of me started. And then I actually got to a great gym and started training with really good guys, Bibiano Fernandez, Tony Pep, all these guys, Nick Iguala, and I learned so much and was able to ascend from there, right? But I had to get my face broken first. I know I'm being a little long-winded, but like I said, like a lot of injuries. I could probably keep going, but we won't. The worst injury, the number one worst injury that I ever had was actually an orbital fracture on the other side. This was like 2012. So I had already had the first one. I had had a few years from not getting massive facial injuries, and it was like, oh yeah, maybe that'll never happen again. And then I'm in a training camp. It was like my first day of camp. I was fighting in the MFC. I was gonna fight Marcus Davis, who was like he's like a UFC vet at that point, had just come out of the show, the Irish Hand Grenade. So we had that fight set up. I had just gone on a big winning streak, or at least had won a few in a row, and then I think I dropped one, and then I won a couple more after. So I had all this upward momentum. Everybody was kind of talking about me like I was gonna be the next thing in Canada. And I felt like that was true, right? And so it was like my first day of training camp. I was already in shape. We're like 8 weeks out for the fight. I did, I think, 5 rounds of MMA sparring at TriStar Gym. The last round that I had, it's weird how all this stuff always happens in the last round, especially when you're training. The last round that I had was with a guy named Moise Rimbon. Most people don't know who that is, but he was like a dude that walked around at about 205 to 210 pounds, but fought at heavyweight. He's this French guy, like France French, not Quebecois French. And he's not a really big guy, but like crazy strong, crazy explosive, crazy flexible, and really like diverse and unorthodox in how he would strike. Very likely like top 2 or 3 strikers that I've ever worked with in my life. Like this guy would wreck everyone in the gym. He'd wreck George, he'd wreck Rory, everybody. Name a person that trained at a TriStar Gym, Moise would beat that guy in sparring. For sure. Now, we were having a really fun round. I feel like everything was just sharp that day for me. Like I was really on point. I was really trusting myself and trusting my technique and believing in myself, and like it was just awesome. I felt like everything was just right. And then right at the bell, like short time, we're in this flurry, bang, I get hit with this super nasty overhand right. Really just perfect placement. I think it landed right about there. And the shock wave, I just felt it go right through my eye socket. And I felt that same electric fire type feeling in my face down there. Like, bang, I get hit. I drop down. I'm like holding my face. Ding, the bell goes. 2 seconds maybe left in the round, and I get hit with this shot. 5th round. And I get up from the ground, like holding my face, knowing, because this is the second time I fractured my face, right? So I know it's broken already. I'm like, oh. I look up at the clock, and there's 2 clocks, and they're like real far apart. Like it's not even close. It's not like I'm seeing like 2 images on the same image, like kind of overlapping or whatever, like normal double vision would be if you like ever got hit and seen double or whatever. This was like, the 2 clocks were like 10 feet apart on the wall at a diagonal. I was just like, yo, what the hell just happened? I've broken my face before. I've never experienced any of this. Like seeing 2 different things completely separated. So it was so unnerving for me that I like walk out of the gym covering my eye. I go back to my room in the dorms, and like I didn't really have much at this point. I'd never been to the UFC yet. Like I had just had enough money for the training camp, right? I had just moved to Montreal. I was staying in the TriStar dorms. I had only had enough money pretty much to get me to the fight, right? And then I would win more money, and then I would be able to keep going, right? That's how much I was trusting myself, right? And I had nothing. And I didn't even know how I was gonna get to the hospital. And this eye, it was so unnerving seeing multiple images like that. I taped it shut like an eye patch made of tape. Luckily, one of the guys that was managing the dorms, Greg Hoffman, your G, drove me to the hospital. They're like, yeah, you fractured your orbital floor. It pretty much cracked off. Like the whole floor of it cracked off. So I get surgery. Thank goodness, Faraz, the hobby, is such an amazing guy. He actually just let me stay in the dorms for free because he knew I was injured. He knew I didn't really have anything. And so at least I had a roof over my head. Still had to figure out how to eat, but I still had a roof over my head. And then I go and I get surgery. I stay in the dorms. I'm expecting that my vision will go back, and then it just never does. And so I talk to the surgeons, and they're like, okay, well, we put like a titanium mesh plate under your eye. So we think that the eye has scarred to the plate, which is limiting its vision, its mobility. So then when one eye tracks up here or this way, right? Because everything was double except for like this, right? Like if I looked above this line, everything would be double. And if I looked over from here, everything would be double. I could see everything down in this direction. Made me, like, for a few years, I would cock my head like this. There's a Fightland documentary when I'm talking about it. It just happened then. Okay, I'm cocking my head like this. It was really, really difficult for me to deal with that. They thought it possibly could have been this mesh plate. But unfortunately, we did just a second surgery, and it wasn't the metal plate. And that was really unfortunate because right before I went in for that second surgery, the Ultimate Fighter called me. They were like, we're finally doing your season. Come to Vegas. And I was going into surgery in 2 days, so I couldn't do it. And then I did that second surgery, and the eye was the same. It was the same. It didn't even do anything, right? So I got a surgery for nothing, and I missed out on the Ultimate Fighter for nothing. And to this day, I still have double vision. I fought the rest of my UFC career with double vision. For a long time, I couldn't even really look at people very well. It would like bother me so much. I was like super embarrassed about it. I didn't want to look people in the eyes because then I'd feel like they were looking at me and seeing like this weird lazy eye that was looking down there and be like, who is this googly-eyed dude? You know, it just like really made me very embarrassed. Now I don't care as much anymore. I don't care. I'm so used to the vision being off. I'm really, really used to it. And it didn't seem to affect my ability to like dodge punches or gauge depth perception. Even though when I turn southpaw and I put my chin down, like I'm looking at you right now and it's double. Like when I'm looking at the camera now, it's double. If I put my head up like that, which isn't the greatest thing, I can see single. Okay, and then on this side, it's not as bad. I can do this and it's not double, right? But I had to fight the rest of my career like that. To this day, it's still like that. And your eyes are just so personal. I don't know. But that is the #1 worst injury that I ever had fighting. Orbital fracture, blowout fracture. I actually got trapped in the crack of the fracture, which is it damaged the bottom muscle, which is why it doesn't want to go up there anymore. So when I look over here, one eye goes up, the other one kind of doesn't. Sucks, but that's fighting. Peace out, people. I love you.